Evening, everybody. Welcome to the regular Bellevue City Council meeting for July 16th, 2024. City Clerk, could you please do the roll call?
Thank you, Mayor Robinson.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Malakoutia.
Here.
Councilmember Hamilton.
Here.
Councilmember Lee.
Here.
Councilmember Neuenhouse.
Here.
Councilmember Stokes.
Here.
And Councilmember Zahn.
Here. Councilmember Zahn, would you please lead us in the flag salute? All right. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And justice for all.
Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
I move to approve the agenda. Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, City Clerk, do we have anybody signed up for oral communications?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. There are 7 total pre-registered speakers. So before I start calling names, I'll go over a few of the rules that council has in place. So the total time for oral communications is for a period of no more than 30 minutes, and all topics must relate to City of Bellevue government. People speaking to items on tonight's agenda will be called first, and then if time remains, people speaking to items not on tonight's agenda will be called. Presiding officer in both of those categories is authorized to give preference to those who have not spoken to council within the last 60 days or who will be speaking to items that will come in front of council within the next 60 days. Speakers are allowed up to 3 minutes to speak, and only 3 people are allowed to speak to any one side of a particular topic. And with that, I will call.
I'm going to add that I would ask that our comments be polite and respectful. If you tell lies about people that malign their character, I will warn you, and then I will ask you to leave. You must speak to a topic that the City Council deals with, that we actually have some responsibility over. And I will offer warnings, and then I will ask you to leave if you don't follow those rules. And with that.
Thank you. Our first speaker is Ann Coughlin. Okay, I'm not seeing Ms. Coughlin. I will go on to our next speaker, who is Mahajan Kamaya. Also not seeing Ms. Kamaya. Then third speaker is Grover Riley. Okay. Fourth speaker is Fei Hao.
Respect the mayor, council members. I stand before you again today to address concerns about our city's process and accountability, particularly regarding tree preservation and environmental oversight. Since our last meeting, our petition, Protect Bellevue's Heritage Trees, has gained additional support. Now with about 90 signatures, demonstrate growing public concern over this issue. First, I urge you to approach our city's budget with extreme caution and efficiency. Bellevue faces some challenges, including 40% vacancy rate in downtown business and major companies relocating out of our city. With the upcoming November election adding further uncertainty, it is crucial that we ensure our resources are allocated efficiently and that our city staff are empowered to perform their duties to the highest standards. However, my primary concern is alarming breakdown in our city's oversight processes. Developers remove landmark trees and alter ecosystems, violating approved permits without facing any consequence. Our city's inspection and enforcement process have failed to prevent or address these violations. This is a systematic failure that weakens public trust. When citizens report violations, their concerns are ignored. When inspections fail to identify clear breaches of permits, it raises a serious question about competency and accountability within our city departments. I respectfully urge the city to prioritize the following area for improvement: review and enhance our permitting, inspection, and enforcement procedures. implement the performance management system to ensure efficient use of resources and following our city's regulations, strengthening staff's development and accountability measures. These enhancements will improve oversight, increase operation efficiency, help rebuild public trust. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Rohit Chandra. Okay, our next speaker is Joe Kunzler, who is joining us virtually. Mr. Kunzler, can you hear me?
Yes, I can, Madam Clerk. This is Joe Kunzler here. I'm going to ask that the Bellevue City Council get together with your attorney that's prosecuting Alex Zimmerman and insist that a condition of his release be paying over $35,000 in public disclosure fines. I find the situation very, very concerning. Shoot. I don't have the case number in front of me, but I have tried to send several emails about it. I know I advised your mayor about the situation, so I'm hopeful that you could, I have the case number. It's 388-53551-BED BVU CNKCX. There's a pre-trial hearing at 10:30 a.m. at the Bellevue Court. This Thursday I'll be attending, and I just really want to stress the need to deal with him, and the attorneys that's dealing with this is Mrs. Petrosian. So just hope to see some real active involvement in this case, and picture Mr. Zuritsel accountable for his violation of trespass and for not paying his PDC fines. Thank you.
Thank you.
Please do not interrupt the council meeting. Please do not interrupt. Mr. Zimmerman, please do not interrupt. You'll have your chance.
We have had some additional folks join us. So I'm going to go back through the list from the top. So Kamaya Mahajan.
Hi everyone, my name is Kamaya. I'm 20 years old and I have lived and grown up here in Bellevue all my life. And I'm here today to talk about the noise deterrent device known as the Mosquito that was installed 2 months ago at Crossroads Park. This device is also known as the youth repellent, as it plays a high-pitched frequency meant for only those 25 and under to hear. And after talking to city employees, I learned that it was installed to deter indigents from the park after hours, but due to the frequency that the device plays, it clearly targets young people. And I strongly believe it is not the right choice for the city to make to deter vandalism, graffiti, and other issues in the park. Not only has it been banned in counties across the world, but the UN Council on the Rights of Children has actually declared the Mosquito device to be in possible violation of children's rights. And the National Youth Rights Association successfully argued in our nation's capital that it is also a form of age discrimination. I personally have had the honor of working directly with the youth of Bellevue, as I've worked for Boys and Girls Club, Jubilee Reach, Youth Eastside Services, and the Bellevue School District. And what I've learned from working with youth in this capacity is that our young people need safe and accessible spaces in our city now more than ever, as a strong, safe community has been proven as a deterrent to juvenile delinquency. In fact, youth in Bellevue recently have started a petition to get rid of this device from Crossroads Park that already has over 200 signatures, which to me indicates the strong community outcry against this device being installed in Crossroads Park, which by no coincidence is also located in one of the most diverse, densely populated, and lowest income areas of Bellevue. As a lifelong member of the Bellevue community, I urge the city to rethink the implementation of the Mosquito noise device and to take steps to remove it and halt any future installations. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Riley Grover. Okay, I'm going to skip to Rohit Chandra. Okay. I don't believe Ms. Coughlin has joined us yet. Correct me if I'm wrong. Okay, and we'll go with our final speaker, which is Alex Zimmerman.
Thank you.
The Heil, Dory Dem Nazi Gestapo anti-Semite pig, yeah. And I talking about you, Mayor, your deputy mayor who interrupt
Okay, I'm
me
going
in
to ask
every
you
meeting.
not to use.
Ma'am, it's
I'm
not
gonna
your
ask you-
backyard.
I'm
It's
gonna
not your
ask you-
backyard. You
Mr.
need
Zimmerman?
Rule what
Mr.
is you
Zimmerman?
bring here is
Mr.
your
Zimmerman?
personal rules.
If you cannot
Nothing
stop
to do
talking
with
and
rules
listen
what
to
is
me,
we
I'm gonna have to ask
constitutional.
you to leave.
No, it's
Okay,
not your
I'm gonna
backyard.
ask him to leave.
It's not your
We're gonna-
backyard. I repeat again. Rule what is you who have this as your personal rules. There's nothing to do with Constitution. Don't touch me. Don't touch me.
Do I have a motion to approve the consent? Charmaine?
Yeah, we did just have a gentleman join us. I'll ask, are you Riley Grover? Okay.
All right, come on up. Thank you.
Hi, I wanted to talk to you guys about the mosquito device in Crossroads Park. I just wanted to read to you guys some of the comments on the petition to remove the device from the park from community members, just to let you know what other members of the community who couldn't make it here today think about this device. One person says, there are so many homes, a fire department, a youth counseling center, and transit stops right next to this park, as well as families out playing late until dark in the summer, which is currently after 9:30, particularly during heat waves when the playground is too hot during the dinnertime hours. What were they thinking? People don't just exist in this area after 9:30 to be homeless or get into trouble. They're simply existing after work. I was there recently and didn't see any warning signs about it either, just families with dogs and kids at like 8:30 p.m. Another person said, I'm a mother of 4 who lives walking distance from Crossroads Park. I do not believe noise repellent is the right way to go about bringing the change the city wants to see here. This is a public space, and the unpleasant noise cannot be contained to just the park or just the people the city wants to deter. It's also ageist to only target people under 25. If there's a problem with young people gathering in the park after sunset, find a more community-minded way to solve this problem. Another person says, why do we hate the very people we designed this city for? Another one says, running around a park after sundown is a rite of passage for any teenager. Y'all clearly forgot what it's like to be young and having fun. This whole thing reeks of out-of-touch boomer who yells at kids on the sidewalk. Please focus your efforts on actual issues, like making sure the youth in your community are fed and housed, for example. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll do one final call out for Rohit Chandra. Oh, perfect. Thank you.
I'm here to just talk about the mosquito, which is the new noise-making device that's been installed at Crossroads Park. It emits a high-pitched noise that is meant to deter indigents from the park after hours. And instead of keeping our community safe, the mosquito only worsens conditions for vulnerable youth. The sound is designed to be only heard by those under 25 years of age, which is a blatant sign of age discrimination. Even the UN Committee of the Rights of Child, as stated before, have suggested the device may violate the rights of children. And they aren't wrong, because the mosquito makes public spaces inaccessible in a time when access to safe spaces has worsened the mental health crisis among us youth. To make obvious what statistics will have happened in what we have all witnessed in the past decade, from 2011 to 2021, the number of adolescents per 100,000 who have had major depressive episode, or MDE, soared from 8,063 in 2011 to 19,863 in 2021, which is an increase of nearly 150%. According to the CDC, when surveyed in 2021, 42% of students felt consistently sad and hopeless, and 10.6% of youth, which is 2.5 million adolescents in the United States, cope with severe major depression. With the pandemic, school shootings, and inequities in our society left and right, students have a very limited number of places where they can feel safe and be with community, leading to drastically worsened mental health among our communities. The handful of safe spaces left for our youth have been public parks, but with the installation of the mosquito, public parks clearly aren't public anymore. Restricting access to Crossroads Park through the noise deterrent targets youth, especially of color, who are suffering from poor mental health, when instead the city should be funding and providing marginalized youth with what they need: a public, equitable, and safe space. Furthermore, the high-pitched ringing of the mosquito discriminates against neurodivergent youth who grapple with sensory issues in their day-to-day life, including issues related to sound. Autistic youth are generally more sensitive to noise, and a high-pitched sound for the mosquito is bound to be uncomfortable and unsafe for neurodivergent youth. The mosquito takes the right of access and enjoyment of public parks away from neurodivergent youth, including young children, and in what world is that equitable? Thank you for the time and space today to allow youth to speak on youth issues. We demand that the mosquito be removed and public parks be made public, safe, and accessible once again. Thank you.
Thank you. That was our third and final speaker that we can hear from on the mosquito device and concerns related to it. We have reached the end of our pre-registered list, so I'd ask if there's anyone else joining us in council chambers who want to speak on a different topic, please raise your hand. Okay, Mayor, there's no hands. I'll turn it back to you.
I just want to take a moment to thank the people who come to public comment to speak to us and use this forum. This is the benefit of having council meetings with public comment that don't require that you speak to the agenda. It is really valuable to hear from you, and I appreciate you coming down, and we'll be looking into all that you have brought to our attention. Okay, next up is the consent calendar. Is there a motion to approve?
I move to approve the consent calendar.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we have 3 study session items tonight, 2 requiring direction. The first one, information only. City Manager, would you like to introduce the first one?
Yes, thank you, Mayor and council members. Recently, this spring, you discussed the Cascade Water Supply contract negotiations, and we had staff from Cascade Water Alliance here that evening. And since then, the board has provided direction to pursue a final contract for water supply with Tacoma Water. Tonight, staff from both Cascade Water Alliance and the city will present the first budget incorporating that direction. So from the Utilities Department, we're joined by the Director, Lucy Liu, as well as Ella Williams, Policy Advisor in the City Manager's Office. And from Cascade, we have the Chief Economist, Ed Sebron, Economist Andy Baker, and in the audience, we have Allison Bennett, the Intergovernmental and Communications Director. So with that, I will turn this over to Lucy to kick off the presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Carlson. Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, Council members. The Cascade Water Alliance is a very important partner to Bellevue Utilities. We buy 100% of our water supply from Cascade. Cascade anticipates the contract with Tacoma will benefit Cascade members compared to developing lake taps by 2042. This new direction does require Cascade to invest in a new pipeline to connect Cascade members to the Tacoma transmission system. And that comes with significant capital investments in the coming years. We support the proposed rates for the next biennium, as well as the anticipated transition to Tacoma Water. But we are also mindful of the long-term cost, as well as the potential fiscal impacts to Bellevue, as well as other Cascade members. Going forward, we will continue to lean on the strong partnership with Cascade because we're both committed to providing long-term, high-quality water supply at as low cost as possible. Tonight, as Ms. Carlson mentioned, is an opportunity for Council to provide feedback and input to Councilmember Hamilton, who represents Bellevue on the Cascade Board. And here is our agenda tonight. I will provide some context about Cascade's charges to Bellevue for water supply and the related impacts to Bellevue's water ratepayers. And then Mr. Sebrin and Mr. Baker will review Cascade's 25 and 26 budget and rate proposal. So for context on the next slide, I want to provide a sense of what Cascade charges Bellevue for water supply in 2024. About 30% of Bellevue's water utility budget goes towards paying for water supply to Cascade, from Cascade. The other 70% of the water utility budget pays for investments to operate, to maintain, and to improve Bellevue's local water system. Because we pass on costs to ratepayers, these wholesale costs do have a direct rate impact. The total Bellevue utility bill is currently about $223 a month for all three services, water, sewer, and storm. The water bill is about 37% of the total utility bill, and it's just under $83 per month. Cascade's portion of that is about $25 per month. We certainly acknowledge affordability is important to our customers. That's why we offer a suite of utility rate and tax relief programs to help residents in need. Cascade will talk more about the specific rate impacts and how that impacts Bellevue later in the presentation, but we just want to put that in context of what it means to a typical ratepayer. With that, I'm going to turn over to Mr. Sebrin and Mr. Baker.
Thank you, and good evening. It's a pleasure to be before you again, and we will move right into our content. We have three general topic areas: an overview of Cascade, which may be a rehash for you, but at the same time, for the sake of the public, we can give you a very quick overview. Talk about the supply negotiations update in terms of what's happened since we last spoke with you, and then finally move into the budget and rates for the upcoming biennium. So as an overview, Cascade has 7 members. Bellevue is the largest of those members. We serve roughly 400,000 people and growing, and we look forward to providing service throughout the east side and also our 2 members that are down at the south end of Lake Washington. We are governed by a board of directors with elected officials appointed from each of our member agencies, and Councilmember Hamilton is our board member right now, and Councilmember Stokes our alternate. And we've been fortunate with a high-quality board throughout my engagement with Cascade, and it's been a pleasure working with them. Right now, all the water we deliver to you comes from Seattle under contract. That contract begins to decline after 2039 and ends after 2063. So Cascade's mission is simple. We need to replace that supply and provide for ongoing growth now and in the future. As an update on the supply negotiations, our board directed us in May to proceed with developing a contract with Tacoma as a primary source of water to substitute for Seattle water in the long term. Also directed us to continue communications with both parties on opportunities to collaborate and the like. From all the work that we'd done over the couple of years prior to that, and I would say that a huge investment of time by your staff and your board, as well as all the other members, in really understanding a lot of details about the contract options that we had available before us, that led ultimately to this decision to go to Tacoma. Interestingly, in both the near and longer term, this is our lowest cost option available to us based on the outcome of the various negotiations. And in the near term, we're looking at a rate increase proposed for this biennium that's significantly below what we had previously projected when we were on the path towards Lake Tapps, and also comparably below where we would be if we had instead turned to Seattle. So this is the sweet spot, I guess, in terms of lower rates near term and the greatest long-term benefits for Cascade and its members. A couple of the benefits that are non-financial but important: Tacoma has adopted a very cooperative and regional perspective throughout our negotiations, as have we, and that's reflected in the nature of the agreement and its evolution. This regional partnership promises future opportunities for further savings, better ways to best use available existing and potential new water resources. So we're really excited about hardening up this partnership and moving into the next stage. Most importantly, for our financial return, it delays the need to bring on Lake Tapps by some 20 years from our previous estimates, and we're now looking at needing it perhaps on the order of 2060 to 2065. There are other options that may help us extend that further, and that flexibility and regional perspective that I just referred to are going to be key for that, for Cascade and its partners. And again, in the short term, we were enjoying lower rate increases than we'd otherwise be facing. I'll add to that briefly that the Water Supply Development Fund, which was approved about 2.5 years ago, is an integral part of our financial planning that's letting us move through this immediate period and the longer term period with lower rate impact. Our strategic priorities remain ensuring water supply for our members and all of our collective customers. Maintaining flexibility whenever possible, looking at resiliency as a primary objective in our supply portfolio and the supplies that we develop. Protecting the natural environment, and part of that comes from integrating resources so that we have better flexibility to protect environmental interests as well as meet water demands. Further enhance our role in establishing regional cooperation and partnerships. Continue to be a model of good governance and accountability. This is an example of that, to make sure that we're keeping our members and the public aware of where we're at and where we're heading. Finally, to respond to emerging issues and new priorities while remaining cost effective. And you may be familiar with some of those in the water supply world. Lead pipes was one a little while ago. More current is the potential contamination of groundwater with PFAS and other contaminants. And having a flexible and responsive system lets us manage through such events when they occur. Our proposed budget for the upcoming 2 years begins to implement the Tacoma option. And we'll move into what that looks like. On the operations side, you'll see there's a significant increase in 2025 over 2024. However, if you exclude the portions that are dedicated to the Tacoma Cascade pipeline, you find that it's a relatively small increase, $250,000 or roughly 0.5% year over year. However, the initial activities for Tacoma Cascade pipeline are generally treated as operating expenses. They're planning oriented and not yet project specific, so they do impact our operating budget in the first couple of years. After that, those costs, as you'll see on the next slide, move to the capital side and become part of the typical capital improvement program that we would then be funding through long-term mechanisms as well as dedicated capital resources. So our change in 2025 is about a $3.4 million increase in expenditures. That represents about a 7% increase year over year. Our change in 2026 is actually a reduction, and that's because of that transition of those Tacoma Cascade pipeline costs from the operating to the capital side. And it drops roughly in half in 2026 and moves entirely over in 2027. Another important point is we are fixed cost dominant, much as your own system is, and 77% of our costs, or more than 3/4, are fixed payments that we do not control on a day-to-day basis. Debt service payments, contract payments to Seattle, operating contract for the Lake Tap system, and then the typical overhead items like rent, taxes, and insurance. On the capital improvement side, Cascade has kind of an ongoing level of investments that it makes and needs to make in the Lake Tap system. As you're aware, this is a system that's roughly 110 years old, and reinvestment is essential on an ongoing basis. That totals roughly $3 million a year over the next 6 years, and we actually project more in the longer term as those facilities continue to age and replacement or rehabilitation becomes more critical. The new line item that's in green is the Tacoma Cascade Pipeline. You see it first appear in '26, when about half of what we're expending will be treated as design and pre-design costs that we capitalize, and then we move into actual design of the facilities in the next 2 years, and then by 2030, we begin construction. So these costs are now being factored into the rate strategy, both near and long term. You'll also note a couple of other items there. Our existing Tacoma agreement has a payment stream that drops off dramatically in 2030. We also have a capital risk line item that is simply put a contingency against the unknowns of that 110-year-old system, where we may need to make expenditures like an emergency valve replacement of a large-scale facility or dike repair. So it turns out that that is a very attractive feature whenever we're going to the bond market. It's been called out specifically in our reviews that have given us a AAA bond rating. So it's important to maintain that, both for the flexibility of being able to respond to needs on a short-term basis and maintaining a high credit rating that will benefit us as we move into borrowing in the next several years. For 2025, our total revenue is projected to be just under $60 million. About $10 million of that comes from growth charges for new development, what we call regional capital facilities charges. About $50 million comes from our, actually less, $46 million comes from our operating charges to you members, and the remainder are miscellaneous revenues. If you looked at this 2 years ago, you'd see a very small sliver for non-operating. One of the benefits of higher interest rates is we're doing better with invested funds. Member charges do make up about 80% of our revenues, with growth charges being the single largest element in addition. Looking to the city of Bellevue in the upcoming 2 years, we have a bit of good news. In 2025, it's actually flat and slightly less than in 2024. This has been caused primarily through the true-up process, during which Redmond and Bellevue discovered and investigated some anomalies in the demands that were being attributed between the two through the interconnected system that you have in the Overlake area, and some significant changes to the allocation of volumes then led to a change in what you're being charged. So the good news is flat in 2025 and a below average increase compared to Cascade as a whole in 2026. Looking out longer term, once we get past this 2-year period, we do see rates going up as we move into financing for construction, roughly 5% average for the next 5 years and 7% average for the 5 years following that. Andy and I have it as our mission to improve that over time. We want to bring only good news forward in the future, and the next 2 years will be the first step in that process as our planning efforts really look to refine what capital is needed and reduce that initial hit for capital improvements we're making now and bring down those rate increases without putting the future at risk. Finally, upcoming board decisions. In September, the Cascade Board will consider the budget and rate proposals for adoption. That will set the charges for the next 2 years and also set our budget on the operating side. We are in the process of moving towards the planning efforts that will occur in that next 2-year period, which will give us much more specific details on what this project looks like and ultimately what it will cost. By the fourth quarter of this year, we hope to be presenting to the board a completed water supply contract with Tacoma for approval and adoption. And we'll start looking at that possibly in September, but certainly by October, with an intent to get a decision made by year end. So that's an overview of where we're at. I appreciate your time and attention and be glad to answer questions on this or any other topic Cascade related.
Okay, great. Thank you for the presentation. Councilmember Hamilton, you want to start us off?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the presentation. I've been serving on the Cascade Board for a pretty short time, but in that time have certainly been really impressed by what I've seen. The fact that continuity is such a key guiding principle is really important and really impressive. Continuity as it relates to water, clean, safe water, effort to keep rates low and avoid rate spikes. Also appreciate all the collaboration and cooperation that are part of Cascade's DNA. And two, as long as you're here, I just think that the management there just does an excellent job and expects and plans for the organization to remain at the top of its game well past the time any of us are here to see it happen. So just appreciate all of that. Of course, Lucy, you and your team and Ella and others at the city bring a lot of expertise to this really important work. And just Councilmember Stokes as well, who has a lot of experience, has been a personal guide to me, but just brings a lot to the work as well. So appreciate that. Just a couple of questions. And I think one of the things that really intrigues me, and we've talked a lot about it at Cascade, is that, how we can continue to make some progress on wheeling and help to kind of further reduce our costs. And I just, if you could tell us all, describe what wheeling is and how those conversations with Seattle are going.
Be glad to. So right now, our capital improvement program contemplates bringing the Tacoma supply and ultimately the Lake Tap supply northward into our service area, pretty much to the south side of Bellevue. There are other elements of the program that then work in system to continue to deliver water throughout our membership. And there's north-south transmission corridors to move water up to Kirkland and Redmond and North Bellevue, as well as a longer-term plan to make sure we can deliver to Skyway and Tukwila. What wheeling would offer is an opportunity to kind of change the game. And what wheeling would be we could deliver water to the Lake Youngs area, which is where Seattle's cedar supply comes from, and then pay them to deliver the water through their existing transmission infrastructure to deliver it to the places of use that you already receive water at, which is efficient both for us at the regional level, but also for you at the local level, that you don't have to reconfigure your system as we change where water is being delivered. We're hopeful that that could come to fruition. It offers great opportunities to both delay and potentially avoid capital costs and lower all of those rate curves that kind of keep us awake at night. The response from Seattle thus far has been interesting. It's been approached at two levels. We've worked with Seattle Public Utilities directly, and we had a delegation of our elected officials from our board go and speak with the mayor directly. At the mayor level, there was general interest in what this means in terms of a regional approach and as well as the revenue opportunity for Seattle. However, at the utilities level, there's been a pretty hard no that we've received consistently. Most recently, we got a response to our latest proposal this morning. So we haven't had a chance to review it and evaluate it completely, and we're meeting with them on Thursday to have them walk us through it. But it kind of reiterated that they view their system in isolation and seem to have a preference to keep it that way. So wheeling may be difficult, at least during this watch of Seattle Public Utilities, unless we move it to a different level for discussion. And Cascade continues to consider how best to approach that at the elected level, direct to the mayor's office, to try to carry that forward. it's a tremendous opportunity, and I must say, not just for Cascade, and it would save us a lot of money, it would create a more reliable system, but it's an opportunity for Seattle as well. It increases revenue, it gives them a greater diversity of potential supplies. Their integration with Tacoma would help both supply agencies deal with shortages, deal with emergencies, and really improve the resiliency of each of their systems individually and the whole regional system collectively. So we will not be giving up on it easily, but right now we're not counting on it. Andy's done enough work to kind of evaluate what it might mean for us and how it would change the path we're on right now, and I think the brief answer there would
The
be
brief
worthwhile.
answer is, it is very much worth continuing to pursue how we can find those mutual regional benefits.
And I guess the corollary to that is, as we've looked at it, it doesn't change the near-term decisions in this budget because we'd need that initial piece of transmission infrastructure regardless, but it may improve things that by 2030, we're on a different path, rate-wise and cost-wise.
So as those discussions continue, how can we best support them?
Good. I'm not the most political person, so I'll let Allison jump on if she has to, but I think what we need to do right now is resolve when does it make sense again to make that direct contact at the elected level, and how should we structure that? And we're trying very hard to give Seattle Public Utilities a window of time to cooperate and let's find mutual advantage if we can. And if we can't, then let's go to the electeds to ensure that that really is a policy decision of the organization and not just a subset.
Okay.
And
So it may mean a delegation goes back to speak with Mayor Harrell, and it may make sense for us to consider who's involved in that.
And we anticipate that this will continue to be a discussion at the Cascade Board meetings to come to a decision on how best to pursue that with the board involved.
Okay. It does seem very important, and we remain ready to help support the discussions in any way we can. So
appreciate that.
we can just stay in touch on that. That was it for me. I'm definitely interested in hearing from my colleagues, so that Councilmember Stokes and I can be sure that we promote policies that represent the community's interests, and certainly as expressed through my colleagues here. So thank you very much. Thank you,
Thank
Mayor.
you, Councilmember Hamilton. Councilmember Stokes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. When I first came on the council in 2012, I was appointed to the liaison for Cascade, and I served through until Dave, and it was about time for a change, and I really enjoyed working with Dave. And what I can give to this whole conversation is perspective on this. We've gone a long time working together on this, the city and the utilities. Our utilities is first class. We've gone along with with Seattle from the beginning. It's always been somewhat difficult working with them, but it's been good. And we have this thing called Lake Taps, which is a humongous asset in many, many ways. It guarantees we'll have water, even if the two cities run out of it. What has been impressive is the way that the utilities agency itself has been very, very positive, working together with the community, working together with the council, with the city, and with the other agencies. And we have all the other cities. Some are smaller, some are bigger, some have half of their water, and we have a couple of not city-owned, but water, and like in Sammamish and other places. So it's a combination. It's the whole region around us, and it is probably by far one of the prime water utilities in the country. And we have plans for again, Lake Taps, which could be a great asset either way. And we have it's been a lot of work together, but and people, we just had a big event for the 15 years of the Cascade. and it's just been fantastic in the way it's been worked together. So we're very, I think, blessed to be able to have this, and to have what is really interesting then is Tacoma coming along, and Seattle, working with Seattle has been good. It's different and all. There were some things back and forth, but Tacoma has really grown and changed and has a way of operating their utilities than something that is, I think, closer to the way we work on things, and it has some benefits to put it there. But what it all comes down to is both Cascade itself and the city of Bellevue have been working together as a partnership for all this time, and it's been very, very positive. It's probably one of the best examples of how a city and an agency and others and the communities, and it takes these other cities as well, can all work together. It's something that we're very proud of in Bellevue. And I'm very pleased to be working with Dave, and the other council members. We've all, as a council, have been very positive on this all the way through this. So I'm very excited to have this new positive program going forward. And as they explained, it's nothing we're going to be doing right away, but it will be, we're working for the future. We're always looking to the future. And staff and the leadership in Cascade and Bellevue Utilities has always been very positively for working along and working with the city. So this is great. This is one of the best things I think we've done in all this time, because people need water, and they need good water. Indeed. And we're getting it.
Great. Okay, thank you. Councilmember Lee.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I don't want to belabor the vision that the City Council of Bellevue made many years ago, so that we are not going to be held hostage by the city of Seattle, because we have to pay whatever they're going to ask. So we decided to have our separate water source, which is what happened to Cascade Water Lines, the formation of it. But I just want to compliment Ed, you being a stalwart for many years of service to Cascade Water Lines, because of your analytic skill and your vision, your understanding of how tricky the water, infrastructure works. So thank you. And we're going to miss you. You are going to stepping back a bit, but we're very happy that Mr. Baker is going to step up, and hopefully he will be, as good, if not better than you are. But anyway, our future is in people's hands. As you can tell, it's very complicated, very complex. You have a lot of numbers that we understand, we kind of follow it, but the crux of it is what give us the certainty that by going to Tacoma, we can see some of the costs going down, some of the costs going up, and then working with Seattle, getting the use of their pipe, because we need to depend on them to use the pipe. And initially, the cost for lake taps, because we have to maybe provide our own pipe connection, and that's very expensive. So it sounded to me, maybe you can explain, that's why, give us in layman's terms, why and how we can save the cost, which we may have to pay if we don't go with Tacoma, if we develop our own resource, what happens? And again, if we use Seattle, we still have to depend on them, right? I mean, if they say, no, we don't use our pipe, what do we do? So maybe you can say a few things about those things that will give us some certainty, or some better alternatives in case something happens. Because we're not always going to be talking to Bruce Harrows. He may not be here, whatever, whenever. So we don't know what it is. But we need to be able to. So I can see that not developing taps would save some costs, I mean, sure, in a sense. But what other alternatives there may be if things don't work out? So maybe you can. And if it works out, this is a great deal, no question about it. So please.
Certainly glad
Thank
to,
you.
and thank you for the kind words. It's been a pleasure working with Cascade.
You well deserved. Yeah, thank you.
I think the wheeling question earlier addressed some of it, but maybe if I step back a bit, our capital improvement program does not assume wheeling. It doesn't assume any cooperation from Seattle. It assumes that they fulfill their contractual obligations and nothing more. We therefore have a complete capital program to deliver water to all our members on time and in sufficient quantity to meet what we project to be their needs. Ultimately, that would involve the development of lake taps. But what we're trying to provide now is a flexible platform that lets us adapt as opportunities arise. And a really good example, just in the last couple months, we've explored with Tacoma the possibility that some of this contract water could be permanent water. Something on the order of 12 million gallons average, 20 million gallons or thereabouts peak. What that enables is, together with either lake taps or a new construct with Seattle or a new source that we don't know about yet, coming from the north, from Everett, from the Snoqualmie Aquifer, we can create a flexible supply portfolio and take advantage of opportunities and control costs. We think we have the worst case scenario in terms of having to build everything the way we've contemplated it now. And then we should be able to just keep refining that to a more successful and optimal outcome. The really neat thing, back to Councilmember Stokes' comments about regionalism, is the best solutions for Cascade seem to converge with the best solutions for the region. And that means there's opportunities to cooperate. What we'd be doing is intertying systems, providing redundancy and reliability, what we now refer to as resiliency, multiple sources of supply that can be managed not just to meet needs, but meet environmental concerns as well. And so if you were to ask me if I were to come back in 30 years, I'd expect to see a supply portfolio where maybe we've downscaled what we developed from lake taps, we've integrated other sources that we've now been able to prove out as continuing to be available, and therefore our investment and our costs have gone down, as well as a more reliable regional supply system.
Very good.
And just to add to that, one of the things that is has been a consistent guiding piece of how Cascade approaches this is that we're trying to balance providing certainty while preserving flexibility. And the timescale for the decisions that we're looking at and the planning horizon that we're looking at is so much longer than any other aspect of infrastructure planning that you look to in other sorts of work. We're looking out to how much water do we need in 2099, and when will we need to develop lake taps? Is it not 15 years from now, but instead 35 years from now or 50 years from now? And what that means is that we will continue to look at these scenarios. We know that things will change, that our understanding of the level of demands that we will need to serve and meet and the resiliency of those supplies that are out there that we understand today will look different 20 years from now. That's just a certainty. But our approach is to where we can secure certainty today to do so, while making sure that we have the flexibility to find those areas of regional benefit as they can be realized in the future.
Can I kind of summarize in the layman's words, hopefully in less than half a minute? We are lucky that we have lake taps as insurance, potential water source. So based on current information, based on current situation, we do not need to expend the money to develop lake taps. But you can use lake taps as insurance, but at the same time, because of the situation, Tacoma water is available. It may be even for long term. And Seattle is willing to play game with us, play ball with us, not game, play ball. So there's a possibility that we can do all the things you just recommended, and we actually can realize the immediate benefit. It's not just maybe the potential benefit. You figure you will be able to, if you negotiate correctly, that we will realize what the benefit. At the same time, we're still in position with lake taps to potentially develop all those possibilities that we would be in much better position then and now than if we don't do anything. But for sure, now it's helping us because the cost will be going down. So
Yes.
we are saving money already because we don't need to develop taps. But in the future, we still can negotiate,
Improve
can
it.
still grow as we're in good shape. So thank you. And for that reason, I think I will support this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Zahn?
Yes, thank you for the presentation, and Councilmember Hamilton and Stokes for serving on that. In my 6.5 years, I have not had the pleasure of serving on the Cascade Board, and so I'm just thankful for the diligence and the work that you do. I very much agree with the Cascade strategic priorities, especially the one that we've spoken about previously about resilience, because when I think about our region, in fact, Councilmember Lee and Deputy Mayor and I were at the K4C session just before this, and some of the things we were talking about is, climate resilience. And when I think about water supply, one of the topics we did talk about is, what about other ways of thinking about water conservation, rainwater capture, gray water, which we're not quite ready for yet, maybe, of that reuse. But as we really think about what kind of demands, the technology is changing, maybe the perception from the public about the different alternative uses in order to water our lawns or other things, flush our toilets. So we actually are able to preserve more of this precious, drinking water for the highest and best use of that. So I really appreciate the fact that you're really looking at it from that certainty and flexibility, because I do think over the next decades, potentially some of those technologies are going to change how we might think about that future picture. And so being able to keep our eye on the ball. I also agree that it is regional, it's a water system. And so the more that we can actually leverage existing infrastructure, so we're not spending money on things that is maybe not the most optimal use. The question I would have about that would be, we talk about the fact that it's an aging infrastructure, over 100-year-old pipes. So I guess my only question there would be, if we're tying into systems that have to be replaced anyway, maybe that is potentially a win-win with SPU, that we're able to share in some costs where their system is able to get an upgrade as we tie in and be able to use that. So I would just urge you to continue to collaborate with SPU and hope that we can get to a win-win. And if we need intervention, we can certainly look at that. But it sure seems to me that as we think from a system-wide standpoint, to the degree we can find that those nuggets where what we're doing actually offers Seattle something with their own aging infrastructure, it seems like that would be the way to go. And so I'm all into this. Lastly, on the capital cost piece, I would like to think that as we go forward as well, that Cascade would look at all the different ways that the industry delivers projects, especially, our water system side. I think that more and more agencies are starting to look at different delivery models, design build as one. Whether Cascade is starting to learn about that and start to lean in to those ones where, just like collaborating with SPU, it's about finding a partner that would collaborate with us as we design and build together.
Yes. And that's so consistent with the vision from day one with Cascade of reaching out to the community of, that pool of knowledge that's out there to find the best way. Thank you.
Okay, great, thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Zahn. Councilmember Newhouse.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the presentation this evening. Generally favorable or in favor, of what you're presenting this evening. But a day doesn't go by that I don't hear about the impact of these rates on our residents, who feel like they're already getting priced out of the city, out of the region, and it's not just due to housing costs, it's gas, it's groceries, and it's utilities. And I guess I'm a little bit disappointed that we don't have a slide where we're showing the final and direct impact to ratepayers going forward with this increase? At least I'm assuming that the $83 and the $25, that's today, right? That's for 2024. But maybe, Lucy, you could speak to this just a little bit in terms of what is that going to mean to those, especially on a fixed income, in the future, given these additional rates that are going to be increasing?
Absolutely. So the impact to the typical resident, the monthly impact to the typical resident in 2025 is actually going to be a reduction of about 17 cents per month, and that's due to that one-time credit that Cassie talked about. The monthly impact with the 2026 proposed rates to the typical residential bill will be about 80 cents per month in 2026.
In 2026?
Yes.
And then do we have numbers beyond 2026 yet or not?
I don't have them with me.
Okay.
But we can certainly provide some of that information when we come back and talk with you as part of the budget process in terms of rate projections beyond 25 and 26.
And is there anything that could change that rate forecast going? I mean, I know you didn't bring your crystal ball with you this evening, but is there anything that could dramatically change what that rate looks like, or the rates that you've provided this evening?
Not for this biennium, because
Yeah.
this is kind of the
Sure.
the platform for everything we're doing. But looking forward, there are a few items. In the next 2 years, we're undertaking a detailed planning study. I expect it's likely that it will change the scale of the transmission pipelines that we'd be building, change them downwards, and therefore change the cost, lower the cost.
Okay.
The reason for that is, as we've explored all these options and started compounding them, we're seeing a larger and larger deferral of when we'd need a larger pipe, to the point that build a smaller one now, build a second one later, then you create redundancy and resiliency in your transmission system, but you save money for this generation of customers. Another one that has a material positive impact is wheeling, if we make progress on wheeling. Because it means we can start deleting one project in the 30s and others in the 40s and 50s. Because we now have a way to deliver water through the system, to distribute it to our members.
Okay.
So those are two very good opportunities. The third one is going to be funding. And as I step down at the end of this year, I'm on a special project next year to develop a funding plan for this specific project. The federal government has a really attractive program for financing. It's called WIFIA. Water Infrastructure Financing something Act. And what it offers is a debt vehicle that's basically lower cost than what we can do with greater flexibility. And it has some features built in that we might think of as grants, although from their side, they see it as full cost recovery. Okay. So that could help lower the impact as we're implementing whatever projects we do. We're also going to be looking at direct grants where possible, and all of those things, especially as we start scaling the project down in total, can become more significant in their impact. So kind of what Andy and I have shared as an ethic is all news going forward, we want to be good news.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I appreciate that answer. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, so Ed shared all the avenues where things could go better, and I of course have to hedge bets a little bit and say that, you know, we have conservative assumptions for what will happen going forward with regards to the construction cost inflation climate, but we don't know. And I imagine you're all aware that it has been a relatively volatile construction cost climate. And so that is an area where if what actually happens is that costs are higher than our relatively conservative assumptions, then that could lead to higher costs in the long term.
So, last question. What's the best way to put ourselves in a position to win some of those grants or WIFIAs that you mentioned?
We are beginning to make contacts with a couple of the agencies right now, that there may even be some grant money for these initial costs that you see in this 2-year budget.
Okay.
But during the development over the next year of that financial strategy, a part of that will be kind of the political strategy that goes with it. I don't doubt that we'll want to be contacting our congressional delegation, pursuing line item grants,
Yeah.
helping them set the stage for success when we pursue funding in existing programs as well.
Okay, thank you so much.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you so much, Mayor. Thank you so much. I really appreciate the hard work that goes into all of the stuff that you do for a safe and reliable water supply. Acknowledging my fellow council member Hamilton and Stoke for their great work partnering with you guys. Can you go to slide 8, please?
And if you
Perhaps.
use a little
Oh, sorry.
quicker.
It should be a negotiation, something.
Yes, it's the.
There we go.
Perfect. That means that this verbiage to develop a contract for a long term with Tacoma means the negotiation that you came last time that you were doing with Seattle, that's already ended. There is no further negotiation with Seattle. And now we are focusing 100% in Tacoma. I'm not talking about delivery method that you said maybe Seattle can help us, but the
I had one caveat to that. After that decision by the board, Seattle delivered to us a proposal that had two options. One of them was a rehash of what they'd already presented, and the board essentially concluded it did not want to pursue. But the other was something new and different that has potential value for both them and us, and actually for Tacoma as well. And that was, as that Seattle supply ramps down, to stop the ramp down at a higher level. Something like 12 million gallons a day instead of the 5 that is envisioned now. What that allows is we can deliver that water selectively and avoid some of our in-system improvements that are in our CIP, but it also helps increase the reliability of our forecast as to when we need lake taps. So we have a meeting with them Thursday to discuss that. We sent them details on what would work for us. They sent back a counter proposal that tweaked some things and added some conditions. Thursday, we'll find out more and have them walk through it. So it's not completely done, but it is supplemental to the Tacoma agreement as opposed to in competition.
great. So is my hypothesis correct? Seattle would said no to the helping us deliver the water part as of right now, because they still want to have some contract with you guys at the main provider partially.
Right. Right. What they've said is really, and it has to do, they're very proud of their system, and rightfully so. They have pristine watersheds, well protected, state-of-the-art treatment, and they don't want to allow other sources to mix into that. We've made the counter argument that in many ways, when you look at the reports, the Tacoma supply may even be better, but they like having control of their system and control of the water that's delivered to their customers.
And it's part of the negotiation tactic too.
It is, hopefully that's true too. And it is, as I mentioned earlier, a somewhat different perspective at the SPU management level within the utility and the elected level above them. So that's part of what we need to explore is there a policy direction that could add some flexibility and give us opportunity? But even what they put on the table, they deserve credit because they were looking at, well, how can we make this beneficial for Cascade? And what they put on the table definitely does bring value, and we want to explore it as a way to enhance what we get out of Tacoma.
So I still have hope that some of those negotiation goes somewhere with Seattle.
Yes.
Can you go please to slide 11?
Oops.
So if I add the green line, we are looking at $115 million to $120 million. Is that correct?
In this time frame, but I need to say 2030 is the first year of construction, and there's 3 or 4 more years after that.
How much is total?
It's roughly 280 to roughly 600 million by the time we're
$600 million. Okay, now can you go to slide 14?
14.
Yeah.
Keep wanting to go to that. Yes.
So then can you tell me if the Tacoma supply direction has $600 million cost, how we are still at par with our prior forecasts? What are those prior forecasts has
Very good question.
that still by having $600 million in Tacoma supply, we are doing better or less than prior forecast. Was there any mistake in prior forecast? That's my main question.
Well, not numerically, and frankly, not strategically either, but the main difference is the prior forecast assumed that when the Seattle contract ended, we had no choice but to fully develop the Lake Tapps supply. And so that was roughly a $2 billion investment rather than $600 million. And the Tacoma contract is helping us push roughly $1.5 billion of that off 20 or 30 years.
Okay. If we had a line that was continuous partnering with our partner Seattle, what would those percentage looks like? I'm talking about 2027 to 2031, 2032 to 2036. Because my whole point is, and again, you can answer me if you know the numbers, and if you don't, my whole thing is, if we somehow get in negotiation and agreement with Seattle and avoid the $2 billion or prior forecast and the $600 million Tacoma, we address Councilmember Newhouse concerns that we are hearing about the rate. So I assume if we somehow get back, again, I know you are all smarter than me, Councilmember Hamilton and Stoke 10 times smarter than me, but we somehow go back to that negotiation with Seattle, I think we save a lot of money for our tax or ratepayer, and I don't know if that's still a feasibility.
We would basically cut that 600 million in half. We have to build one pipeline just to get the water from Tacoma to Seattle or to their facilities. And then ultimately we'd be paying them to deliver it through their system. So there's a new operating cost, but that's when we're using it. So yes, we could cut the level of capital investment in the 30s in half. And I don't know if you remember the numbers offhand.
I don't remember the numbers offhand.
It would be fair to say that 7.2 might be more on the order of
3.54. And I think that's a huge percentage if we can make that work. So I really encourage you all to do some magic in your negotiation tactic or skills or whatever you want to name it, and then we make Seattle to be our partner, continue our partner. That's benefit all of our residents and the whole region as well.
Yes.
Thank you, Mayor.
Well, I'm glad I went last because my colleagues said almost everything I wanted to say, and I appreciate the comments. I do want to thank you for the demand true-up. I really appreciate that, and I appreciate staff advocating for that and for making that happen. But when I look at what you've projected, it looks like a really bad balloon payment, and it's like, this just doesn't feel right to be doing this to our city. I'd like to know, in the future, how we can advocate for Wheeling. What can we do? Can we put WIFIA on our legislative agenda and advocate for that as well? The one concern I have about relying on this relationship with Seattle is in times of disaster, if you have a real water shortage or there's something that happens and things are compromised, are we going to get a fair share of a limited resource if it's going through Seattle?
Great question. Contractually, yes, they're obligated to provide the same level of service to all, but in a crisis, it's not contractual at that point. It's practical, and where is the water needed? We've worked with the members to some degree and other agencies to look at contingencies for dealing with water supply in the event of that earthquake. How do we simply keep drinking water on people's tables when they need it? The work that was done regionally through the Water Forum suggested in the event of a large earthquake, it could be 45 to 60 days before service is restored to 90% of the customers. If we've interconnected more systems, we start improving it because whatever comes online can get something to people even before we get full service restored. And it's a little frustrating for Seattle to be so insular at the moment about not wanting to intertie and create that flexibility. And we do keep, coming back to those points that we somewhat flummoxed because it generates more revenue for them. It uses capacity that they have no use for otherwise in their transmission system. It integrates multiple watersheds and sources of supply that create reliability for all concerned. And it seems like it's a win-win-win, and you can just keep adding wins. And yet we're getting this resistance to opening up their system and having others in an influential role in their decision-making. And that's the frustration we're dealing with right now.
I know that we're looking at our well system in Bellevue for emergencies. Do you have any updates on that, Lucy?
That is, actually, we just started on
Okay.
on looking at the wells as an emergency source of water supply. And so we will be looking at that as part of our capital program.
So it just seems like if we did the Tacoma and we collaborated with Seattle, that would be the ultimate project. So giving us the most resiliency in our system.
Yes, absolutely.
So I'm really for the WIFIA. Anything we can do to keep rates more typical to what the city is accustomed to, I think.
Agreed, and it's a tremendous program because it's oriented towards large-scale projects, which this is.
All right.
So it's not like going to the Public Works Trust Fund to try to get $5 or $10 million towards your $600 million. It's going to get half of the project covered through, a very flexible funding package.
Well, I know we have Genesee Atkins here tonight. I know she's listened to all of our comments, so it'd be great, Genesee, if you could get back to us on how we might, as a council, support some of these efforts. Thank you. Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Shall we plow on? Yeah. Okay. Next study session item is requiring direction. So go ahead, Ms. Carlson.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. So we have two study sessions tonight that relate to land use code amendments for Council's consideration, and both are initiating these land use code amendments. The first is a LUCA being proposed to bring the city into compliance with House Bill 1042, which encourages redevelopment of existing buildings into residential uses. And staff is seeking council direction tonight. So we have Christina Gallant, our acting code and policy director. We have Rebecca Horner, our director of development services, and Matthew Menard, our code and policy senior planner. And with that, I will hand it over to Christina.
Good evening, Mayor Robinson, Deputy Mayor Malakutian, and council members. As noted, we are here tonight to seek initiation on two LUCAs, both driven by state legislation. First on our list this evening is the existing building redevelopment LUCA. This is for compliance with House Bill 1042. And while the provisions of this legislation are fairly direct in terms of what we must address within our code to facilitate these types of conversions, they do touch on a number of different areas within our code. So we have an opportunity with this amendment to think through those potential areas of complication to make sure we're setting up a really predictable, clear outcomes for our applicants. So the direction we are seeking this evening is to consider initiating work on the existing building redevelopment land use code amendment to comply with House Bill 1042. Our agenda this evening, just a moment, I'll pass to Matthew. We will recap the provisions of that legislation, then present an overview of our planned approach to the code amendments, provide detail on our plan for outreach with this update, and then finally conclude with our planned schedule. So with that, I'll pass to Matthew.
Thank you, Christina. So House Bill 1042 was passed by the state legislature in 2023. It's really trying to do two things, which is encourage the conversion of existing underutilized office buildings into residential, or encourage residential buildings to redevelop at a higher density. As with many of our state bills that have been passed in the last couple of years, this LUCA must be adopted by June 30th of 2025, or the state law does supersede our local code. So the requirements of the bill, it applies to existing residential or commercial uses in our commercial and mixed-use areas of the city that allow multifamily development. State law does define what an existing building is, which is a building that has a certificate of occupancy at least 3 years ago. And in the state law, when we're talking about redeveloping these existing buildings, you cannot expand or change the shell of the building in any way. So we're only talking about redeveloping the inside or the internal configuration of those buildings. So with that, we must allow 50% more residential density for existing buildings over the base density allowed in that land use district. We cannot require additional parking to be required with the redevelopment. We can require that they maintain any parking that is existing on site. We cannot require any additional parking or standards beyond what is required for new buildings, so we can't require them to go through an additional process that we wouldn't require for a new build, for example. We cannot require ground floor commercial unless it's along what the state code is saying, a major pedestrian corridor. Sort of unfortunately for us, the state law says as defined by city code, so it's very loose in what a major pedestrian corridor is. That's certainly something we will work with the city attorney's office with, but we do believe our current definition of the Grand Connection would meet that requirement. So we could continue to require ground floor commercial uses along the Grand Connection. We also can't deny these projects based on, or we can't require these projects to do a transportation concurrency study or an environmental study. And we cannot deny a project based on an existing nonconformity. So if the building was built a long time ago and the zoning has changed and the building no longer meets the zoning code, we can't deny a redevelopment project based on the fact that it does not meet the current zoning code. There are some limitations with that as well. So as you can see on the map here, and we have provided a slightly more detailed map in your packet as attachment B, as I mentioned, it applies to all commercial and mixed-use areas of the city that allow multifamily housing, which are the purple areas you can see on the map. This land use code amendment will encourage housing. It would also be consistent with requirements of House Bill 1042, which is why we are here. We also want to make sure, and we will do outreach to the development and affordable housing community, that current provisions of the land use code are not preventing the redevelopment of these existing buildings and the reconfiguration internally, so to ensure that we are getting this housing that we desperately need within the city. So with this land use code amendment, we are proposing they're basically to be very tight with the state law. I'll talk about the timeline shortly, but we are trying to do a quite quick turnaround with this land use code amendment. We have a lot of larger state law and larger projects around with land use code, so we don't want to overburden you and the Planning Commission with these, so trying to stagger the timing on these. So we will stick to the state law with the 50% density increase. We will need to implement that in the land use code amendment. We are going to have to exempt several areas from those ground floor retail requirements, especially around downtown. We potentially need to create a definition for major pedestrian corridor, as I mentioned. It's something we'll work with the city attorney's office on, whether or not we need to do that with our existing definition of Grand Connection. We will need to update the parking requirements to require that they maintain parking to meet current standards, but we can't require additional parking if the existing parking doesn't meet those standards. We will need to add an exemption for these buildings from our non-conforming standards. And then we will work closely with our development review teams to make sure that our permitting and form requirements are consistent between new buildings and existing buildings. From my analysis of the code, it looks like they're the same, but we want to make sure we're working closely with the development review teams to make sure there's nothing that catches us out and make sure we're consistent with that state law. And we will need to exempt these projects from any transportation and environmental studies that they'd be required to do.
That was a big slide.
Yeah, there's a lot of words there. Hopefully with this code update, so we're going to stick very close to the state law. It shouldn't be an overly complicated code update is what we're hoping. We're hoping that we can contain it into one section, which many sections of the code can point to, that would only address those redeveloping existing buildings rather than trying to change a lot of the code individually to meet this code process. So hopefully it won't be quite as complicated as it looks on that slide. We will do outreach with this. It is a land use code amendment, so that is the process for requirements. So that would be the Planning Commission would process this LUCA. There would be a public hearing with that and public notice with that public hearing. We also plan to reach out to market rate and affordable housing developers again to make sure there's nothing in the existing land use code that is preventing this from happening. As always, we do want to try to encourage housing with all of these land use code amendments. We will have an online presence, which is a web page on our website, which gives updates on the land use code amendment, and we will spread it to our city newsletters, our city listservs. We'll reach out to those members of the public that are signed up for the email blast, and we will use that to reach out to neighborhood associations as well. We get a very good distribution on those newsletters and emails that we send out, giving updates on these projects. As I mentioned, the schedule is quite quick for this land use code amendment. Launch is this evening, if so directed. We will begin stakeholder outreach if you do direct us to continue work on the LUCA. Basically, as soon as we leave the hearing tonight, we are hoping to go to Planning Commission Q3, Q4, really shooting for a Planning Commission date in September with this one. As I mentioned, there are some state law amendments that are larger and more complicated than this, so I'm trying not to overburden the Planning Commission by getting this to the Planning Commission a little bit earlier than those more complicated land use code amendments. Wrapping that process up later in the fall and hopefully bringing this back to you for final adoption Q4 of 2024 to Q1 of 2025. So quite a quick turnaround on this one. And a quick presentation from us tonight as well. And with that, Mayor, I'll hand it back to you for any questions or comments that you all have.
Okay, Deputy Mayor, let's start with you.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you so much. I'm very excited. This bill encourages redevelopment of existing buildings into residence use, and I think that's aligned with our creating more housing. Great. I'm looking forward to the Planning Commission and the public hearing because I am sure hopefully our public engagement is good enough because I'm sure there are many concerns, residents. This kind of bill allows for additional density, but then we have this balance with potential parking concerns. So hopefully we can come up with some solution that can address that concerns that, hey, we are increasing density by 50%, not requiring for additional parking. What would be that balance or impact in our city? Looking forward to all of that. Great job. Thank you so much.
I'm going to go next. We're going to do reverse order here. I have a few questions. So if I love this idea, and I have to love it because it's a state mandate, but I still love it. And I'm wondering about utilities. So you have a building that's used to one use and you convert it to housing. How do we support that with the appropriate utilities?
Sure. So we did speak with our utilities team, and they've been very helpful with this. So when there's a project that comes into the pipeline, development services, the development review teams work with our utilities to make sure there's adequate utilities for that project. If there are not adequate utilities, because there's a letter they have to sign that say there's adequate water and sewer for the project. If there's not water and sewer for the project, that project cannot move forward. There's nothing in this state law that prevents us from holding back these projects if there's not adequate utilities. So the way our process works currently, we do a check with any redevelopment and any increase and change in that water and sewer use to ensure that there's adequate utilities. Utilities has also let us know that they are at the beginning of their 2-year projection process, and they will take this redevelopment bill into account when they do those projections for that 2-year period. So they can take that into account. I've been told it's a very good time for us to be doing this because they are at the beginning of that process, so they can really work that into their projections for the amount of water and sewer we're going to need in the future.
Perfect. Okay. I was wondering if there's anything we could add to the code to encourage this type of development. Is there anything that would make it easier for developers?
It's something we will speak with developers about and get their input on. The bill is pretty comprehensive. A lot of what we hear from preventing development from happening often is parking and density. So the bill addresses those things. But if there's anything in the existing code that's really holding that back, hopefully we can get that out of the code, and then we'll speak to them about, we are trying to keep it pretty tight to the bill, but about any other things in the code that could maybe help them to encourage them to do this.
Okay. And then my last request is on the map, I noticed that Belfield Office Park isn't in there. And I just think that that is one of the most wonderful opportunities to convert something that was office into housing. And it's probably not zoned for multifamily, which is why it's not on the map. But is there anything we could do to examine that and see if it would be possible to include it?
So depending on what the land use district is, and we'd have to look at that, potentially there's opportunities with FAR Phase 2 after the comp plan is amended, if there's a change designation on the comp plan for that parcel. We can look at that. With this project, if it does need a redesignation, that's going to be probably beyond the scope of this, but if it is zoned for multifamily housing, and sometimes our GIS maps are not quite accurate, or there's some parcels left out, so we'll look at that. If it is zoned for that, we certainly can reach out to them and see if that's something they'd be interested in and what would be holding them back as well.
All right, thank you so much. Let's see, Councilmember Newhouse.
All right, another bill taking away more local control. Awesome. So exciting. So with that, what can we control? I'm hearing a lot of restrictions in terms of we can't do this, can't do that, but I'm not hearing a lot about what we can control. Can you speak to that a little bit? That would be great, because I'd like to know exactly what the Planning Commission can look at other than just implementing, or their recommendation to us is implement the, what was it, HB 1042 as is.
So we still maintain control of the way we would permit and regulate all the other buildings, with the exception of some of the things around density and parking. So that control is maintained. That's something the Planning Commission would look at because it's in the existing zoning. What the Planning Commission would really look at is if there's something we're doing that's above and beyond. So say there's something in the existing land use code that's preventing these redevelopments from happening that we hear from the development community. That's really where we can make a change in the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission can make a decision on that beyond state code.
Okay.
Really, the state code, other than the provisions you've seen on that slide, continues to allow us to regulate these in exactly the same way we would regulate a new build. We do maintain that control on permitting, form standards, and the like, other than density, some of those studies, parking, and the nonconformities.
So the conversion is very interesting, just because of what Seattle City Council did just recently with the conversion of office space or commercial. Are there any developers really kind of chomping at the bit, looking at doing that currently? And is this the time, as I think the mayor touched on this a little bit, is this a time where we need to look at incentives? Because that's a little bit unique in terms of the costs, and completely converting office space into residential is very difficult. It's very expensive, and without major incentives, I don't see how that could possibly work. So is now the time to talk about incentives? I would hope that the Planning Commission would take that up, looking at incentives and maybe looking at what Seattle did to make it a little bit more enticing to do that. We'll stop there and let you.
Yeah, we will certainly look at what Seattle did and see if there's anything we can work in to our code amendment that would make it more enticing. In terms of developers, we haven't heard anything from anyone wanting to convert office to residential. We have had one developer approach us looking to potentially increase the density of an existing residential building, maintaining that residential. We can certainly talk and look at incentives. This is certainly an appropriate time for council to do so if they want to provide us any direction on incentives, but it is something we will look at. We are always trying to look at how we can get the most housing out of these land use code amendments as we can.
And did the bill give any context in terms of why no retail on the bottom floor? I mean, that could really enhance the overall, kind of livability in that area or in that building. Is there a reason why, other than just, I guess, density or adding more housing in there?
Yeah, there's no specific context. I think in the context of the bill, just having that flexibility to put units where you need to put units in the building is really what they're going for. So it's just maximizing flexibility in the bill.
Well, there really isn't flexibility, right? I mean, so we can't put any retail or anything else on the bottom except for residential. Is that, do I
The
understand that?
developers could, so we can't require that, but the
Okay.
developer could choose to put commercial on the
okay.
ground floor. So we wouldn't say you're not allowed to do this. We're just saying where we require commercial on the ground floor, you can now put residential units on
Okay.
the ground floor.
Thank you for that clarification. And then also the no transportation or environmental study. Do we have any context or understanding of why that is in there as well?
We don't.
And the impact that that could have to those neighborhoods or surrounding areas that we don't do that study?
Yeah, there's no context in the bill. It's an expense and it's a time sink for those developments. So I would assume that would be the reasoning, but there's no specific context in the bill.
And I'll step in to add too, the bill does have some provisions around preserving our ability to regulate for health and safety.
Okay.
So we will have ongoing legal analysis to understand, how those two match up and what's in our control still versus what would be off the table.
Okay, great. Yeah, I mean, I'm all for creating more density and more housing in the city of Bellevue. I just wish we had a little bit more control when it comes to implementing these types of bills, but really appreciate the briefing tonight. Thank you.
Councilmember Zahn.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate you coming before us so quickly with this bill. It looks like there's quite a bit of work to do, and the June 2025 is the deadline in order to get all of this done. So I appreciate the fact that we've got to move rapidly amongst all the other things that the Planning Commission is going to have to take up with, right, 1110 and other work that is in their pipeline. I appreciate hearing from my colleagues because I think it's an interesting time because although the bill is quite prescriptive, from that sense, if a lot of that prescription is to actually create some enabling of office to housing where we know we need more housing, and actually we've had, I believe, a office and housing imbalance for a while where we know that we have more office than housing, and we've been actually working on actively trying to move forward with more housing instead of office. But I was actually thinking about what are the steps in order to make anything like this happen? Because I was at a conference probably about 4 or 5 months ago where one of the sessions was talking about office to residential conversions from the construction and design standpoint. And what we were hearing there was that they are regulated by, different code provisions. And so from a life safety of residences versus office, that there's a lot of cost involved in any kind of conversion in this way. So one, it's not really clear to me how likely it is that we're actually going to have any of these office to residential conversions. I was thinking back to in 2019 when we went to Dallas for the BDA tour. They spoke about the fact that some of those office buildings, when they had a slump many years ago, was vacant for a long time before they finally had enough of a economic climate for those offices to be converted to residential. So I guess I'm really wondering, what is the likelihood that anything is going to result from this? And are there some incentives that we want to talk about? Or is this really purely there's a bill called 1042 and we regulatory have to make these changes, right? I think there's a difference between the we must and therefore we're going to do this cleanup versus here's an opportunity to really lean in, and what are those incentives that would make something happen, if at all? I mean, Eastgate corridor is 40% vacancy right now in office, so it seems like out of any other spaces, that would be a space where those offices, if there was an interest, I think the mayor brought up Belfield as some office spaces too. So I guess I would like to understand, is this an exercise to comply with 1042, or is this really an opportunity for us to lean in much more deeply?
So to be quite frank, I don't think we anticipate a huge number of these being converted. Just the way office buildings are built, it's very difficult, as you mentioned, to turn them into apartments. we will go out to the development community and ask them, what will help you or what would make it easier or better to convert these, and we'll see what comes out of that, and we'll see if there's any interest from the development community. As I mentioned, we have one conversion that's residential to residential, so not quite what we're looking for, but it's something that we'll assess as we move forward with this land use code amendment, is how can we get housing out of this? Because that's really the end goal of the bill, and that's what we're trying to do with a lot of our projects as well. So it's something we will have a discussion with the development community about, certainly.
Yeah, because I was just thinking about the fact that offices usually don't have a lot of restrooms, they don't have a lot of kitchens, and so, the only housing that's really likely would be one that has, right, shared restrooms and not a lot of need for kitchens, and so it kind of leads to this really odd residential type of need. So anyway, I'm just really curious about, again, right, is this just an exercise, we're checking a box, or are we actually going to lean in and do something?
And Seattle did look at this, and from what it sounds like, they found that the most likely office to residential conversions were in Pioneer Square, where you have the much older, much smaller office buildings, which is not a development type we really have in Bellevue. So we're probably not as likely to see those, but we will do that outreach to try to see if we can encourage it as much as we possibly can.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Lee.
Thank you. I appreciate your presentation, and you did some of the preliminary work. But we all want more housing. We all want to have more density. Yes. So we all have shared the same goal. I'm sure House Bill 1042, has similar ideas. My concern is that, but I do have concern, that we, the city of Bellevue, and what you guys are doing, what we are doing, may, for example, like our regulations and our requirements may be compromised, because as we hear from Councilmember Zhang, the developers think that it's not that easy. They're not jumping to it because it'll be higher cost. There's a lot of regulation that we have now today that they have to overcome, right? So they have to go around it. So in order for us to make it work, I don't know what we need to do. If we hold on the same regulation, expectation, requirement we have, they're not going to meet it. So we have to change it, modify it. That's what we're doing. We're going through the process. So I'm concerned that we may be doing some things that may be compromising our own safety. Hey, we talk about safety, right? Health. We talk about so a number of things I'm concerned with. And because the state legislation, when they made it, they probably not looking at what our requirements are. And I don't think they just said we will do this. So we need to talk to the developers. And I think you already said that there aren't going to be too many because of what Bellevue is. So two things. One is I'm concerned that our rules might be compromised. And two is if there are not many people that are going through this, we are expending, even though you mentioned it's not that much, but still it's valuable resources, staff time, commission time. And so I'm not really sure it's justifiable. So for those reasons, I would really like to see the horse get before the cart. We need to be talking to some developers, really finding out what the market is, whether it's worthwhile. Then if it is, and they can make suggestions, and we think that it's not going to compromise our requirements, then I think we should go full blown so that it really can happen. But if it isn't, why are we doing this? Yeah, sorry?
We don't really have a choice. Maybe you could
I
explain.
don't know what choice.
the
Well,
statement.
can you explain what do you mean no choice?
So
Well, we're talking about this.
I
If
can
there's no
address
choice,
that.
why bother to talk? Let's go. I have things to do. Go ahead, please.
The state bill does say that the state law supersedes our local codes if we don't adopt something by June 30th, 2025. We do think that we are in a better position if we adopt code that works into our land use code that addresses the provisions of the bill than simply allowing the bill to supersede the code. The way the bill is written is somewhat vague. It's also written in the sort of you shall not framing, which doesn't really work well with our land use code. So we do think there is a significant benefit from our end on working those provisions of the bill into the land use code, both to give us more control and to frame those shall not statements into the way the land use code would be written.
Can you tell me, when does thou shalt not? That means we have to?
So
Is it such, I thought land use code is the local authority. So how can they force us to do things?
So
I thought we were living in a free society.
the state has superseded us on this code, which they have the authority to do.
I know, but what can we do to say, hey, that may not be right for us?
You would,
I think this whole meeting today, this whole purpose of this presentation is to give us the opportunity to give guidance on how we want to implement these codes, how we want to see them in Bellevue. We have to do something, but
We're discussing whether we should or not.
it's not a matter of whether we should or not, it's more
Why
of
not?
how.
Why?
So,
You said thou shalt not or thou shalt. I don't hear that.
so the way the bill.
We also have a legal remedy. Maybe a lawyer can say a few words about this. What is a legal?
I'm going to ask the city manager to weigh in for a moment.
I would like to have a legal
I'm going to ask the city
interpretation.
manager to weigh in.
Councilmember Lee, I think what Matthew was trying to explain is that we do have an option, which is to allow the state code to supersede us. And the staff is recommending that we don't take that approach, that we initiate the land use code amendment process and work this into our code so that we have some ability to implement it within the same guidelines and process that we use for new buildings. So we do think it's the best approach to initiate the code, work with our developers and our stakeholders, and then to go through the planning commission process and bring it back to you.
Says you have to, then we got to figure out is that how legal is it? And then you mentioned that it would be our benefit to look into it. But I just put the question, say if it's only a few apartment residential, maybe there won't be any. So why go through the motion? I don't know.
Well, I'll
Right?
just add one other thing
Yeah.
to that point, which is we do have a goal to increase housing within the city, and there could be some opportunities that come through this, and we want to make sure that we're looking for that. So I wouldn't say that it's for not to try to do this. So, and I think that it's a good process for the city to go through to do that.
Well, why don't we do it before we change the
Okay,
code?
why don't we
So we
have-
know what to change, we know how to change.
Councilmember Lee, may I ask that you hold this for, maybe you can have a staff briefing with Councilmember Lee to go over some of the questions that he has left. Okay, Councilmember Stokes.
Yeah, interesting conversation. The state does have authority on a lot of this, and I think you're taking the best approach on it to deal with this. And the reality is, and it's, the whole city work and development and housing and apartments and everything else is kind of crazy now because of everything that's gone in the past. And the reality is, though, if you read magazines, you read the paper, you look online, there are a lot of cities, including Seattle and others around, smaller ones around here, who are doing this. It's not, we're taking it seems the attitude is, well, this will never work, we can't do it, we're being forced to do something, we'll go through the motions. I think that's not a good way to approach it. It's not, we don't know how much it will happen, but there are buildings, big, tall towers. There are smaller buildings that have been converted. I wonder myself, how did they get enough restrooms in there and all? But they are making it work. I mean, the reality is, they're doing this, and we don't need as many buildings right now. As the things shift within the city where people want to be. So I think you're taking a very good approach on it. I think this sets it up so that we have as much control as we have where we need to, but we can't continue to say, well, gee, they can't tell us what to do. It's like the 1042. People want to say, don't tell us what to do. And we need to take advantage of these opportunities and giving us some things that we can do in the community. And we're changing. This is not the same city it was 10 years ago. These buildings aren't the same. We're always in change. And the legislature is giving us an opportunity to focus on this and creating an atmosphere that, hey, maybe this will work. And I think that's the approach we ought to take, not say, well, how can we avoid this? We need to have more housing. We need to have more affordable housing. And there are a lot of buildings out there that are vacant. And if the goal is to, well, we'll just not do anything or see if we can get around it and let these buildings stay out there for 2 or 3 years and then we'll do something, that's not a good approach on building a city. So I think this gives us a good opportunity. It may not work like we think it should be. It may not, and it may work a lot better. But given all the stuff involved in this, I think the state really has given us the opportunity to do something that is what they want us to do, but in a way that we can work with them on this, that we can do things. It's not just you have to go out and do, a 10-story building, do this and that in it. They're giving us an opportunity to actually provide some affordable housing, provide some other facilities out there. So I appreciate the fact, I think you've really set it up, and we need to get together and work on this. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work, but we will never know if we don't try this and work on it that it might work, and it's been working in a lot of other places. Big cities, small cities, here, across the nation. So it's not just something somebody's trying to make us do. It's something somebody is actually giving us something to help us. So I'm ready to go forward on it. And I think, again, you've really set this up well. I'm looking forward to us getting this in place.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Hamilton.
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks for taking us through this. It kind of seems like we've all copied each other's homework. There's certainly a unanimity of opinion here. I have really nothing new to add, but I don't want to let that get in the way, so I'll just make a couple of brief comments. Certainly interested in what can be done in Eastgate 990, like Councilmember Zahn said. Plenty of feedback regarding the engagement process and what can we do, what incentives can we build in to actually get some of these conversions to take place. So I would be interested in that. And then also interested to kind of get a sense maybe, and if you know now, I'd love to hear it, but what does it change in the timeline for like a multifamily project? Any idea, conversion versus, from the ground up? Could we save some significant time? Do you know?
That I'm not sure. From the city's side of things, the permitting is likely to be quite similar, so the permitting side is going to be the same. I'm not sure if it's going to cut significant time off of a construction project or not.
Okay, good. Yeah, I'm definitely in favor of moving this forward, so thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there a motion?
I move to direct staff to initiate work on the land use code amendment to comply with the House Bill 1042.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed?
No.
Okay, so I think it passes 6-1. All right, let's go ahead and take a break until 5 after, 8:05. Okay, we are minus one council member who needed to go home. So, City Manager, this is an action item. Would you please introduce it for us?
Thank you, Mayor and council members. So this is the second land use code amendment being brought forward to you today to initiate, and that's the direction that council is seeking, consideration to initiate this code amendment. As with the previous one, it is related to a House Bill 1293, and the subject of this one is revising the existing design standards and guidelines to provide clear and objective regulations for new development. So joining Christina Gallant and Rebecca Horner at the table is Senior Planner Kirsten Mant. And with that, I'll hand it over to Christina.
Robinson, Deputy Mayor Malakutian, council members. As stated, we are working towards our second initiation of the evening in response to state legislation. This LUCA concerns our design review standards. And joining us for the first time is our new senior planner, Kirsten Manst, so offering her a warm welcome tonight. The direction we are seeking tonight is to consider directing staff to initiate work on objective design standards LUCA to comply with House Bill 1293. Our agenda this evening, we will provide a bit of background on what design review is and how we approach standards and guidelines in our codes to help understand the scope of this initiative. We will provide an overview of House Bill 1293 itself, have a quick explanation of what we are already doing that doesn't need to change, and then specifically what changes we are looking at as necessary for compliance with this legislation. We'll finally conclude with some of the summary, the goals for this project. So with that, I will pass to Kirsten.
Thank you. So before getting into some of the details of the bill, I just wanted to spend a little bit of time kind of level setting around what is design review, how do we define it, what do we have to do when it comes to design review and the process, and some of the language that'll be used throughout the course of the presentation. So this is directly from the code. This is from our design review permit section. Essentially, design review allows us to ensure that site development and the structures in specific areas comply with certain aesthetic goals that are set and have good design quality and conform to the requirements of the code. So in terms of some of the elements that we typically review through the design review process, some of those are related directly to the building massing and facade itself. Some of them have to do with kind of the pedestrian scale environment when it comes to buildings and frontage. Also has to do with the site itself, landscaping, get into things like lighting, materials and color, access requirements, facade modulation, things like step backs. So there's a lot of different elements that can be a part of design review. Of course, they're not involved in every project, but this kind of gives you an idea of the general scope of things that our review staff look at when they're doing design review or just reviewing buildings for design requirements. A really key component of this LUCA is being very clear about what is going to be a required piece of code versus what is just guiding language. So the way that our code currently is written, we have standards and guidelines. Standards that are applied to a project have to be required in order for that project to gain approval. A guideline is more of a helping understand the intent of design and the intent behind regulations, and those are not required. So part of my review of the code is being really clear about when we have things that are standards and when we have things that are guidelines, and in the context of the LUCA, which things have to have that objective language. So a little bit about HB 1293, also passed during last year's legislative session, also one that has a deadline of June 30th of 2025. The most simple component of it is that it just requires clear and objective design standards. It also has to have a concurrent and/or consolidated permit review, and the review process itself has to be objective. We cannot require more than one public meeting, and it also encourages jurisdictions to enact regulations that will help expedite review for affordable housing projects. So good news first is, what are we already doing that's in compliance? So one of the big parts of this is that we already do administrative design review, and that it already occurs concurrently with other permit review. We already do not require public meetings for design review, since it is something that goes with staff. And staff, I think also just this last week, launched the expedited permitting process for affordable housing projects. So that is something the land use team has already been working on, and I believe was rolled out to the BDC last week. And then in terms of what needs to be updated, so as mentioned, as required under the bill, we can only include objective standards. So what does that mean? A lot of language that's currently in the code, both through in the guidelines and some of the standards, are terms like visually interesting or visually attractive. These are, of course, subjective terms, because what does that mean to one person versus another person? It's unclear. So we want to ensure that
Any of our standards don't contain this language. Guidelines could potentially contain some of this language, just with the clarification that it is not required code. And then we'll also be spending some time going through the actual design review process itself to make sure that that process is also clear and objective. So in terms of our approach to this LUCA, similarly with the prior LUCA launch tonight, we have a bit of a shorter timeline and we have a lot of other kind of bigger projects we need to get into as well. So we're trying to take an approach of not getting too far into the weeds on the subjective or the content components. We don't really have the scope to create new design standards and guidelines. We really want to clarify what we have and just make sure that that process is really clear in terms of what's required and of what is required, making sure that those regulations are very straightforward. So the first component of this is reviewing what we have and reviewing the design review process, working with our land use team and the development community as well to understand what's working, what's not working, where can we clarify. So we want to identify standards and guidelines that are kind of good to go as is, and also areas where we need to revise language, and then potentially areas where we need to remove language. And then finally, we'll be implementing that and making the revisions that we need. In terms of engagement, we've already spent some time consulting with our land use team since they know this the most intimately, particularly the design review staff, and also working with our community development design team. We want to work with the community in an informing capacity and eliciting some feedback. And then, of course, our typical process for Planning Commission and Council, and then we'll have a website presence and working with the newsletters as well. Current draft schedule right now is, of course, initiation this evening, and if we'll move forward, it will be continued staff review and drafting, and working through engagement in the fall, ideally starting the process of Planning Commission for a public hearing at the beginning of next year. We really would like to try and get ahead of this and ahead of the June deadline as much as we can. And that concludes my presentation this evening. That's all I have. So with that, I will close the presentation and open up for questions.
Okay, thank you, and welcome, Kirsten. Deputy Mayor, let's start with you.
Thank you so much, Mayor. Welcome as well. Great job presenting. Another, I think, amazing bill, in my opinion, to simplify the development process by ensuring we have a design standards that are clear and objective. I think that makes Bellevue even more business-friendly city that we are. I didn't have any question besides saying I'm excited to see what comes to Planning Commission. But can you go to slide 8, please? Because you put it there, now I need to ask. Can you tell us more about the last bullet, and then tell me what exactly we have done, and then the whole House Bill 1293 encourage streamlining the review process for affordable housing, and I just wanted to know if there is any overlap, what is the difference, what we are doing even is better than what we are required to do, so those kind of questions.
I might have to defer to the folks that have been here before I started, because I believe this work began a ways before my time. My understanding is, again, the bill doesn't require it, it does encourage it. So in our opinion, we're already ahead of the curve, but I will potentially leave it to you folks to explain what the process is, the new process.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Robinson, Deputy Mayor Malakutian, members of council, Rebecca Horner with Development Services. In terms of work that we're already doing, we have a team in place that's working on affordable housing pilot expediting program, which hopefully it's very successful and we can expand that to other permit types. As for this one, we're structuring it to work very closely with the development community, the applicants at the front end of the process, and using a project manager approach. And we expect to reduce timelines significantly through that process. So that is, in a nutshell, what we just launched. And we have, I think, 2 projects in that pilot program right now. I think that answers.
Just one follow-up question, because you use the adjective significantly. Can you tell me what does that mean in the number of days or months?
We are projecting that right now. I'm hoping it's a 50% reduction in timeline.
That's
I
awesome.
think 30% is pretty achievable, but we are refining that right now. The goal is as much as possible. I think 30 to 50% is a safe projection.
Thank you so much. I don't have any question, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Zahn.
Yes, welcome, Kirsten, and thank you, Christina and Rebecca. I think that your presentation is very clear, and what it made me think about is really just how important this is for both the staff as well as anyone with an applicant to get really, really clear about what are the must-dos versus the flexibility. And I would just say that I really urge you to, dig deep into what truly are the must versus actually providing for some flexibility that does make sense for us. And then as you work on this, I keep thinking about the fact that sometimes our language is very wordy and hard to interpret. So if there's a way to, as you are doing this cleanup, think about word choices that may be more simplified language that doesn't have a lot of complexity where you have to read the sentence 3 times to figure out what it's trying to say. I know it's not necessarily something that's in this bill, but it seems like since we're going to be touching everything to go, is it a must? Is there some, flexibility because it's a guidance, that it would be an opportunity to do that. So I would just say that if that is something that's possible, it would be an important aspect of this. So that's it, short and sweet, thanks.
Okay, Councilmember Hamilton.
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks for the presentation. Clear and objective regulations. I think that's great. So I know that we strive for that, but anytime we have the chance to go back and clean things up, I think it's great. So certainly glad to see that. A couple of questions for you. In kind of doing this work and in complying with HB 1293, what's the impact on staff kind of going forward on the design review staff? Does this make things a little bit easier, or what are your thoughts there?
That's certainly one of my big goals for this project, is not only for the requirements to be more clear to the applicant, but to also make staff's process a little easier. So I have had a good opportunity to chat with them so far about kind of the approach we're taking to the LUCA, and then ways to engage with them moving forward to make sure that we're identifying the correct things to be changed and making sure the language is really clear. So in general, the goal for this project is to, of course, comply with the state requirements, but also just to make sure that this is making everything ideally easier for everyone involved.
Okay,
And the
great.
process itself, too.
All right, thank you. And then too, I wanted to follow on the deputy mayor. So this expedited review for affordable housing projects, is this for projects that are 100% affordable housing? Or could they apply to projects like maybe a children's museum, a grocery store, a shopping mall that has some amount of affordable housing attached to it?
At this time, it's 100% affordable projects, but like I said, it's a pilot, and we're hoping it's wildly successful and we can replicate it to other permit types in the future.
Okay, I know that some other jurisdictions have done a little bit of a combination, so I hope that's something we can take a look at, and definitely in favor of moving this forward, so thank you.
Councilmember Stokes.
Yeah, thank you. I agree with my colleagues. This is very good to put this together, and I particularly appreciate Councilmember Hamilton's mentioning on that. And this is a good way to approach this, and if we make it work here, we ought to be able to make it in other places. So it's good. And sometimes it's good to have one you can focus on and do this instead of a whole bunch of them. But really appreciate your work on this, and looking forward to this actually helping move this along better. So very good, very nice. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Newhouse.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, great presentation and welcome as well. obligatory, I think we all have to say that, but truly welcome to the city, and great presentation. Yeah, I mean, there's nothing really here to contest. I think anyone would agree that streamlining our regulations and permitting and reducing any barriers, wait times, et cetera, is all good. I guess two questions for you is how do we also ensure that we put in there a consistency of interpretation as well, which is something that I hear often. It's great if we can speed it up, but we all got to make sure that it's interpreted the same way as well. And then additionally, how do we strike a balance between the streamlining and the reducing, but also maintaining kind of Bellevue's standards, Bellevue's quality control, if you will? How are we going to approach that?
Yeah, so a big piece of that for me is going to be relying on our land use team, specifically the design review staff, because they'll be able to let me know, very clearly which regulations they're already kind of implementing, even if it may not be clear if that's a requirement or not. So that's kind of one of the baseline components of this, is making sure everyone understands standards are required, guidelines aren't.
Right.
And so then of the language that we currently implement, which things are working, which things do the design review staff like, which things do applicants like, and then making sure that those are the clear standards that we're implementing.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, so I have 4 things I wanted to ask you. One is, how do you think these changes are going to affect the final project visually? Do you think there's going to be big changes? Because I love what we're seeing built in our city so far. The architecture is really beautiful.
Yeah, and in order to keep this project simple, our goal is not to change things particularly substantively. It's to kind of make sure we're continuing on with the things that we like, but just that the language is more clear and meets the requirements of the law. Okay. So one thing that when we upzoned downtown, there were a lot of discussions on what to require, what to encourage. And one of the things that we had long conversations over and decided to include was to require step backs for buildings of certain height. Are we going to maintain that as a requirement? Without getting into the code itself as being top of mind, if it's from my knowledge of the step back requirements, it's pretty cut and dry of what you have to do and when. So that would be considered something that's pretty objective, and it wouldn't be something we'd be looking to change substantively.
It is or it is not?
As far as I can speak to.
Tower setbacks are a great example of an objective design standard. When you say above a certain height, you have to step back a certain number of feet. That is something that does not require interpretation to apply.
I gotcha. I just wasn't sure when I looked at the slide. And just as a further explanation on the affordable housing expediting of the permit, I was the one who originated that idea because I was trying to incentivize more affordable housing. So it didn't have to be, in my mind, be the whole project be affordable, that it include affordable housing, but it certainly wasn't intended to be for just any development. It was supposed to be a bonus expedition that you got if you included affordable housing. So just so you understand the origin of that. Okay. And then I think you answered my 4th question, so thank you. Okay, is there a motion?
I move to direct staff to initiate work on objective design standards code amendments to comply with House Bill 1293.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you very much. And with that, we are adjourned.
All